Hey there, this is Natalie, and in this video I want to talk about a Mushoku Tensei character who made his first appearance in episode 20 of the anime, Prince Zanoba Shirone. This video will be in two parts, the first looking at Zanoba's backstory and his character when we first get introduced to him, which is spoiler-free for anime-only fans. Then there'll be a second part, going into how he affects the story later, and his general character development throughout the series. I'll let you know when to leave the video if you don't want any spoilers for the next season of the anime and beyond. If you like this kind of content about Mushoku Tensei, please consider subscribing to my channel as I make new videos about the series regularly, as well as other anime content, and subscribing really helps me out. So with that covered, what is the deal with Zanoba? When we first meet him, he seems like an incredibly eccentric guy with a more or less unhealthy obsession with dolls and figurines. He greatly admires Rudeus for having been the one to create the figurine of Roxy that Pax originally bought. He sees Rudeus as a talented artisan and isn't really interested in anything else about him. It becomes clear that all that really moves Zanoba is his obsession with dolls. We also quickly learn that he is what's known in the setting of Mushoku Tensei as a blessed child or Miko. He will be the first character we hear about like this in the anime, though Mikos are introduced earlier in the light novels in the story of what happens when Eris goes out to fight goblins, which happens on the day when Rudeus was first reunited with Paul. This Eris story is going to be in an OVA that's going to come out in March with the Japanese Blu-ray release, so while it hasn't been cut, Zanoba still ends up being the first Miko talked about in the show. Mikos are people with single special abilities, which they're typically born with, though there are some rare cases of people becoming Mikos through other means. In Zanoba's case, he has super strength. Miko abilities are kind of similar to divine protections in Re:Zero, if you're familiar with those, but they're far rarer, and they are heavily valued by the countries that people with these abilities appear in. Being a Miko definitely has some serious downsides for the characters with these kinds of powers, both because the powers themselves can cause them problems, and because once the country you live in knows you're a Miko, they'll usually take control of your life and use you as a tool. There are such things as cursed children too in this setting, the opposite of Mikos, but whether something is called a blessing or a curse seems really more down to how useful it could be to the people who can control that person, rather than down to them being inherently different things. For Zanoba, who's a fairly low-ranking prince of the Shirone kingdom, rather than a random person with these abilities, his Miko status has always been known about by the country, and they do consider him a valuable potential weapon. But he has certainly experienced the downsides of his own abilities, because he has accidentally killed people before. He accidentally ripped his younger brother Julius's head off once, and has long been treated as a kind of dangerous, vicious dog by the royal family. And he has the unfortunate nickname of the Head-Ripping Prince. But how strong is he, really? Well, it's said that most fighters can't survive a direct hit from him, even with the kind of spiritual armour called Tuki that warriors in this world can learn to use. He can cause all kinds of destruction to his surroundings too, and his strength also lets him withstand attacks that would kill other people. His main weakness is his stamina, because that isn't augmented by his supernatural strength. Zanoba is also very intelligent, and as well as knowing a lot about art through his fascination with figurines, he also knows a lot about military tactics, as he's always believed that one day he'll be called upon to fight for his country, given his status as a Miko. Zanoba's personality when Rudeus first meets him is certainly that of an odd person. He's come to see humans as nothing more than dolls with flesh, and less interesting to him than actual dolls, perhaps because he knows he can't really hurt a doll. He helps Rudeus because he cares about him being able to keep on making figurines, more than because he cares about what Pax is doing, though he is shown to be someone other people consider a good person, by the fact Ginger, who was originally one of Zanoba's own guards, but who he sold to Pax for the Roxy figurine, stays loyal to him. His biggest wish is to be able to make figurines himself, and he gets Rudeus to promise he'll take him on as an apprentice if they ever meet again. Rudeus is basically just humouring him when he agrees to this, seeing Zanoba as someone who could quickly become very annoying, but who he'll probably never see again. Zanoba is happy enough with this, and takes to calling Rudeus his Shisho, or master. And that's really as far as I can go without talking about spoilers. So if you don't want to know any more about Zanoba, then now is the time to close this video, because I'll be talking spoilers in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so Zanoba actually ends up being one of Rudeus's best friends in the series, and so he's an important character who features in the story a lot, after reuniting with Rudeus at the Renoa Magic University, which we'll see in Season 2 of the anime. I won't be able to cover every event or interaction he's involved with, due to just how much he is involved with the story, but I want to look at the biggest developments, how his character changes over time, and why his presence in the story is so important to Rudy. After the events in the Shirone Kingdom, when Zanoba helps Rudeus, he's sent away by his family to study at the Renoa Magic University, which is really just a way of getting rid of him, while still keeping him alive because he's a Miko. He becomes what's called a special student, which means students are invited to study at the university with some particular perks, like being allowed to pursue their own research rather than attending regular classes, among other things. The class of special students is very small, and they're all people who are either of very high standing in the country they came from, or who are basically geniuses, who have been especially chosen by the school. Rudeus joins the class of special students himself, after a period of travelling as an adventurer, and there's more information about this in my video about Rudeus's love life, so I won't go into how he ends up there too much here, given this video isn't really about Rudy. When Rudeus joins the class, he finds that Zanoba is already there, and he's keen to hold Rudy to his promise of becoming his master in figurine making. Rudy does agree to do this, and starts trying to show Zanoba how he does it, but Zanoba doesn't have the mana capacity or magic ability to make figurines with earth magic the way Rudy does it. His Miko strength also means he doesn't have the control over his manual dexterity to be able to make figurines well the traditional way. Zanoba keeps trying, and Rudeus also really wants to have his student be able to produce good figurines, because he has a plan to mass produce figurines of Ruijerd, as a way to spread awareness about the Spurred not being evil, due to his promise to help Ruijerd with his reputation. Zanoba accepts that he may never be able to make figurines to a high enough standard, and they come up with a plan to train someone else to do it with him overseeing. Basically, this plan involves buying a slave, though they do intend to treat the person in question more as an apprentice, and in the end, she ends up becoming more like a member of the family. Rudeus thinks the best person would be someone from a race known for their craftsmanship, so a dwarf, and he also wants a child, because he has a theory from his own development and that of Sylphie, that people who start training as children can end up with a much bigger mana capacity and can also learn chantless magic more easily. They go to a slave market, bringing along another friend from the university, Fitz, who is actually Sylphie, but Rudeus doesn't know this at the time and he thinks it's a boy. Again, this is all explained in more detail in my video about Rudy's love life, if you want to know a bit more about why that's a thing. There is one slave for sale who is exactly what they're looking for, a young girl who is a dwarf, but she's in very bad condition. They buy her, give her food and healing, and also give her a name, because she didn't have one before. Zanoba names her Juliet, after his brother Julius, who he accidentally killed. Juliet becomes Rudeus's student and begins to learn to craft figurines, and she also becomes a happy member of their group of friends at the university. The Ranoa Magic University accepts people of all ages and races, so it isn't strange for there to be a child with them. And being a dwarf, she really loves drinking beer with a certain other member of the group. She's known as Julie by most people. Later on, Rudeus ends up buying a house because he wants to marry Sylphie once he's found out her true identity and no longer live on the university campus. He gets a good deal on a mansion close by to the school because it's thought to be haunted. Before closing the deal, Rudeus, along with Zanoba and another friend from the special class, Cliff Grimoire, who's a genius musician and the grandson of the Millis Pope, and who ends up being the third member of Rudeus's best friends group after a bit of a rocky start, all spend the night in the mansion. With Rudeus and Cliff having strong magic and Zanoba having Miko strength, they think they can take on whatever might have been causing problems at the house. In the middle of the night, something does attack them, but when they fight it, it becomes clear what it is: an animated doll powered by magic. They later find out this was part of the research done by the mansion's previous owner, and Zanoba, who is of course infatuated by the idea of a moving doll, takes it back to his lab at the university to begin to study it. They find notes relating to it in the basement of the house. Zanoba continues studying the magical automaton with the intention of being able to produce his own one day, and in doing this, he, Cliff and Rudeus learn a lot about things like magic circles, which become helpful in other things they and their other friends are doing throughout the series. He also develops a magical prosthetic arm as part of his research, which he can wear himself to be able to work on figurines without his Miko strength causing problems, and which Rudeus also uses as an actual prosthetic arm for a while when he loses his own arm in battle, until he's able to have that healed with magic. Eventually, they begin to mass produce and sell prosthetics and other byproducts of their research, as well as the figurines, starting a crafting business that is run by Zanoba and Julie. And ultimately, they even manage to make a fully functioning automaton that looks like a human, bringing Rudeus's dream of a robot maid to life, though this isn't until many years after their university days, when it's covered in the redundancy side stories that come after the main Mushoku Tensei plot. There are some shenanigans around them making automatons that look like certain people they know, including one that escapes and causes a lot of misunderstandings after Zanoba and Rudy fall asleep drunk. But it is during Zanoba's time as a student that the biggest event in his general storyline happens, and I'm not talking about the time Rudeus walks in on him humping a giant doll, though that does also happen. He is summoned back to the Shirone kingdom by Pax, who has staged a coup and become the king. Rudeus doesn't think he should go, given it sounds like he's very likely to die, but Zanoba strongly believes he owes it to his country and his family, that he has only been allowed to live up until now, despite the trouble he's caused, because one day his strength would be needed like this. Rudeus and Roxy, who is now Rudeus's second wife, again check out the Rudeus Love Life video for more on that, go along with him. I won't go into huge detail about this because a lot of it ties into a bigger storyline involving Rudeus, Hitagami and Orsted that I don't really want to get into in this video, as it's huge spoilers and also means explaining a lot of stuff that's well outside of the scope of this Zanoba video. But essentially, Rudeus has his own reasons to get involved in this situation, as well as wanting to make sure Zanoba survives. And it's in Rudeus's best interests for Pax to remain king. However, he is suspicious of both Pax and someone who has become Pax's right-hand man, the death god Randolph Marianne. At first, Rudeus, Zanoba and Roxy manage to successfully defend the fort they've been ordered to station themselves at from an attack from a country to the north. Then they manage to negotiate a temporary peace treaty using a hostage, and they think things are going well, until Ginger arrives with word from the capital that the castle is under siege from an unexpected source, a little-known prince who had won the support of a warlord named Jade. They make their way back there using a secret underground passageway, but find the castle deserted apart from the death god Randolph, who's defending the room where Pax is. It turns out that Pax and Randolph were actually not the people they should have been worried about, and that Pax was genuinely trying to become a good ruler, as well as that he's now married to a low-ranking princess named Benedict, who was kind of an outcast in the Dragon King kingdom. She's pregnant with his child. Pax has grown up quite a lot, and Zanoba is moved by this, but unfortunately, as all of this is revealed, there seems to be no chance for Pax's victory, and he commits suicide by jumping out of the window. Zanoba tried to stop him, but failed, and the death of Pax has a big effect on him. He says that all he could think to ask was why something like this had to happen. Zanoba had always been someone who didn't really understand people. Perhaps because he had always been treated as different, being a Miko. Perhaps because he'd been afraid to get close to people in case he accidentally hurt them, as he had his younger brother. Or because people had always been afraid of him. He loved dolls because they were like people, but much easier to understand. Yet, since becoming friends with Rudeus and Cliff, and essentially adopting Julie, as well as being involved in so many things that meant working with other people, he had changed. He tried to be more human by learning from Rudeus, and he found himself caring about things in ways he never had before. He remains a strange and awkward guy in some ways, but as he develops and gains more experience, this becomes just an eccentric personality and a way of looking at the world a little differently that sometimes proves pretty useful to him and his friends, rather than a lack of warmth for or understanding about other people. After this event, Pax's wife returns to the Dragon King kingdom with Randolph, and she has her son, Pax Jr., who ends up becoming good friends with one of Rudeus's own children, a story that's told in the side story Jobless Reincarnation, which is explained in my video about what happens to Rudeus Greyrat's children, if you want to check that out. Zanoba, however, renounces his family name and title, and returns to Ranoa with Rudeus, where he now commits to working alongside Rudeus and his other allies in the main plot. This is where Zanoba remains, by Rudeus's side, working on projects that help both in their overall objectives and on running the manufacturing company that makes, among other things, the magic robot maids, prosthetic body parts, and Ruijerd figurines. Zanoba ends up living with Ginger and Julie, and Rudy is never quite sure in the end what sort of relationship he has with these two women, though Zanoba does confirm at one point that he can't have an intimate relationship with them due to his Miko strength, meaning their bodies wouldn't be able to handle all that Zanoba. It's probably because of this that we never see him have any children in the story. Another interesting relationship Zanoba has is with Perugius, the armoured dragon god, who lives in the sky castle known as Chaos Breaker, and I still think that's the coolest name of anything in the series. Perugius becomes something of an ally to Rudeus and most of his friends, though he's not so keen on the demon race characters like Roxy. But the one he gets along best with is Zanoba. The two of them bond over their shared appreciation of art, and spend a lot of time together discussing things. Usually when Rudeus needs Perugius's assistance with something, it is Zanoba who does the asking, since Perugius is a lot more receptive to requests coming from him than from the others, and he seems to respect him as, literally, a man of culture. So that's a summary of a lot of the more important things that happen with Zanoba in Mushoku Tensei, though as I said, he has far too big a role to really cover everything he plays a part in this sort of video. I think he's one of the most interesting characters in the story, in the way that he goes from his first appearance, where he seems like a wacky side character who could potentially be nothing more than an annoyance to Rudeus, to a character with a lot of depth and integrity, who is one of the best friends Rudeus could really want, to help him through the events of the series. I'm sure nobody really expected him to play out this way based on his initial appearance, which was just shown in the anime, But that's one of the great things about this series. Even people as awful as Pax can eventually have sides to them that make you care about them. And the three very flawed characters of Rudeus, Zanoba and Cliff, who I'll make a video about of his own soon, can become a trio you really want to see interacting together as friends. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments, and if you like this type of video about Mushoku Tensei, please consider subscribing for more. Thank you as always to my supporters on Patreon who are on screen right now, and to all of you who help me out by watching my videos and talking to me in the comments. Thank you for watching this one, and I hope to see you again very soon.